Good morning, everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon to myself here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where it's blustery 43 degrees. So hopefully you guys are faring a little bit better. Listen, my name is Mark Knox, and I am a vertical solution sales consultant for Sharp NEC. So it is my understanding of my job that I am supposed to be the expert in certain verticals, corporate and education and house of worship, just to name a few. So hopefully this presentation resonates. Let me first thank the team over at Lightworks for inviting us. This is going to be an exciting day, and I get to kind of set it off. So without further ado, here we go. I like to start off every presentation going over what I call my 8 display questions. Now, why do I have 8 questions for display? Regardless of what vertical you're in or industry you're in, whether it's education or corporate, going through my 8 questions will guide you down a path on selecting the appropriate display technology for your space and the appropriate display technology to enhance the viewer experience. Okay, so we're going to go through these very quickly, and then I'm going to show you what happens when you don't answer these questions. So number one, who's going to be the primary viewer? Obviously, there's different stakeholders, there's different responsibilities within organizations, whether it's different departments of a university or it's different departments in a corporate environment, whether it's marketing or finance or the art department, so on and so forth. Who's going to be the viewer? That leads us into question number 2. What is the content they're actually planning to view, right? So again, different stakeholders have different expectations on seeing their content. So if it's the marketing department, maybe it's color critical. If it's the finance department, maybe contrast is more important because maybe they're looking at a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of black text on white background. You want to understand what the content is they're planning to view. Of course, what time of day is the viewing taking place? Now, this really is for our conference rooms, a lot of our conference rooms and our classrooms. Listen, they might have east-facing windows, which means you may want to consider a brighter projector in that space, right? Or maybe even a direct view LED wall if that room is going to be utilized in those morning hours where the sun's going to be coming right through the window. Leads us into our 4th question. Where is the display going to be used? Is it going to be used in a classroom, a conference room, wayfinding in a lobby, digital signage, right? Menu board, right? We want to understand where the display is going to be used because that is also going to determine our next question. How are the facilitators / users planning to connect to that same display? So whether it's a bring your own device situation or if it's going to be USB-C, HDMI, we want to understand who's bringing their equipment in and how do they plan on connecting to that display. Why are we putting on display in that space? What's the overall goal or vision? Listen, as I visit higher education institutions, corporate offices, houses of worship, every single space that is tacked for display has a goal or vision. Typically, the vision holder or the person who has established the goal for that space is not the individual selecting the technology, and it's also not the individual installing the technology. So we want to make sure that we connect those dots to meet the expectation of, again, what is the goal or vision of that space? Was there a display here previously? And what are the concerns? The worst thing we can do is replace a troubled or service-ridden display with another troubled or service-ridden display, right? Just because something was 5,000 lumens or because something was a 70-inch flat panel in that space previously, we don't just want to take that and duplicate it, right? We want to look at the service history, we want to look at the complaint history to make sure that we're actually enhancing that space when we're adding new technology. And then lastly, are there any other factors we should consider for this room? So with this particular example, what I'm thinking here is, again, let's say we're hanging projectors on a active roof, meaning that there's HVAC directly above the infrastructure of where the projectors are going to be hanging. Maybe we're looking at doing an auditorium where we're going to have some lighting features in the light path of the projector. We want to understand all of the factors, some even the X factors of those spaces. Now I want to show you what happens when you don't answer these questions, right? This is what I call my wall of shame, and I update this regularly from Google and from personal photos to just make sure that we understand that people are making mistakes in AV every day, right? And sometimes if you don't entrust the right individuals to install and design your spaces, unfortunately, applications end up kind of strange. Now, why are we talking about displays? Well, listen, every single application that we deploy from a technology standpoint that includes some form of display has a lot of moving pieces.
I'm going to send you the, is that your question? I'm going to send it to you. No, I'm going to send it to you right now. Don't worry.
It's okay. Mariel,
Yeah,
can you mute your line? Thank you. Every single display in a space is the part that you see, right? So yes, we focus a lot on back-end processing. Yes, we focus on matrices and switchers and how do we, signal paths, and we focus on all of these things, and that's awesome. A lot of times, though, we try to save money when we get to the display for whatever reason. I know there's less expensive options available. You can go on down to your big box store and you can pick out a nice 4K monitor and think that it's exactly what's prescribed for the application. The reality is where you want to direct resources matters, right? And the display, whether it be desktop monitors, laser projectors, direct view LEDs, professional monitors, interactive displays, narrow bezel video walls, that's the part you see, right? So I want to make sure that we all understand that in order to enhance the viewer's experience, we need to focus more on the part that you actually see. At Sharp NEC, we are in a very unique position to offer every commercially available display technology on the market, right? So if it's commercially available, we offer it. It's a wonderful place to start when we're talking about displays, because you can come to us and we can curate a solution. Now, the constant question, and this is where we get into some of the considerations for choosing display technology. How will the technology I help deploy enhance the viewing experience? You can change that word viewing to viewer experience. How will it enhance the viewer experience? The reality is display technology is necessary in a lot of applications, but in others, it is not. For example, in order to teach a class, you don't necessarily need display technology. Now, you may think you do, but the reality is most of us grew up in a situation where we didn't have any form of television in our classroom. And if it did, it came in on a big black cart for TV day or movie day, right? Our teachers taught us just very well with either a whiteboard or a chalkboard. So how are we enhancing the viewer experience? When we add displays to a space, this should be our constant question. Now, it used to be, especially for higher education, and you can apply this to a corporate environment as well, your professor came in with their device who interfaced with the network that typically was controlled by the university or the corporation, going through some type of interface device, whether it was a podium or some HDMI outlets on the wall, going through some type of switcher, then translated into a large venue viewing device such as a projector. Then we hit a large screen, and then we relied on that loop to be closed between the professor and the student, that professor's information would be clearly directed and translated to the student, right? Now, in this particular consideration, what I would call the traditional workflow, we were, as AV people, in control of most of these points, right? However, when we look at the post-pandemic application, we are in control of less and less. So the reality now is there's many different things that we must consider, especially in a hybrid world. So whether we're in room or on premises, or whether we're remote, and we'll get into that in a moment. But the post-pandemic consideration typically comes down to this. You still have your professor. Your professor is interfacing with whatever device they choose. Typically, it's a laptop or a tablet that's going through an unknown network, right? Because we can only control the network so far as our property line. Then after that, it's up to the student or the remote worker and the infrastructure that they have in place. And then that gets to the student or the remote employee, again, to translate the information. And we hope that that loop is closed. Now, there's some things to consider as we take out pieces of this puzzle, right? The first thing I would consider, which is very simple, something that we didn't always speak about, but we have to talk about it now because our room design is changing. And again, this is education as well as corporate. Something simple as sightlines, right? Sightlines are extremely important in a hybrid world. And the reason because we have multiple monitors to look at now. Now, typically, when you are not in a virtual situation and you're in a meeting interacting with people, you're actually looking at people, and maybe you're looking at one monitor. Everybody's sitting around a conference room table, you're looking at one monitor, or you're sitting in a classroom, you're looking at the forward screen. Now, even me sitting at my desk right now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, if I count my personal screen, 5 screens at my disposal. that are all competing for my attention at any given time. Sight lines are extremely important. I'm gonna give you an example here. This is Jefferson University in Philadelphia that has a room where every single student, no matter which direction they look in, has not only a view of the large venue presentation via projectors, which are located strategically throughout the room, but they also have image magnification and body tracking PTZ cameras for the professor, so that they don't have to crane their necks to actually see the professor. They can just look at the screens. Now, this is a wonderful example of taking sight lines into consideration, because the fact of the matter is students walk in with their own personal screens. And again, you're competing for that screen time because you're trying to make an impact, whether it's in a conference room or in a classroom. When we talk about sight lines, the next thing we want to consider is resolution. So this is just a fun little helpful chart that describes, your diagonal size or your display size against your resolution against your viewing distance. So typically most of us will fall in that 1080p range. However, the fact of the matter is now we can put larger screens in smaller rooms with the advent of 4K, right? And then if you are looking at certain products from Sharp NEC, like our 120-inch 8K panel, you can actually sit even closer to the screen and have a larger screen in that room. Again, this is all about viewing distance, sight lines, and resolution, because ultimately we're trying to enhance the viewing environment. So increased resolution brings increased brightness a lot of times, brings increased color reproduction, and it also increases engagement. Now, I come to this fact of this particular application at the University of Auburn, who had two very well-performing projectors. No issues out of the projectors, other than the fact that this is their statement room at their business school. Now, it being a statement room, they have a lot of high-profile guests here, people who come in to do guest lectures. And the main complaint that they have for this space is, hey, we want to give a lecture with the lights on. The projectors look okay, but as soon as you turn the lights on, the image is washed out, and the environment that we need to be more engaging kind of goes by the wayside. So in order to make this environment more engaging, again, we're competing with those personal screens that everyone has in their pocket. They decided to move to direct view LED, which again gives us better resolution, higher brightness, and more accurate color reproduction. Okay, so another consideration: more screens, smaller rooms, less viewers. Again, in a corporate setting or even in an educational setting, we are looking at our sight lines. We're looking at the size of the rooms because, due to social distancing awareness, not necessarily mandates, but just awareness now, we're putting less students, we're putting less students in rooms, and we're putting less students in smaller rooms, more huddle spaces. Now, what used to be a weird paradox is now the norm. So if you looked at the title of the presentation, it said from classroom to corporate office. Now, the reality is what we see in display technology is typically your corporate customers adopt technology first. Your corporate customers adopt the technology first. Then that trickles into higher education, right? So it's the cycle of corporate to higher education. However, the way that the workflow actually is the student becomes the employee. So now, instead of the corporate dictating what's going on in education, education is now dictating what's going on in corporate, because the student is turning into the employee. So the technology that we deploy in education, we now see translating to the hybrid workforce in corporate, right? So again, more screens, smaller rooms, less viewers. We're looking at more huddle spaces now. Next consideration that we're looking at is mid-sized rooms, multiple screens, present and remote viewers. So this is typically an education application, but when you look at it, what you would have is virtual students that are displayed on, let's say, a 1x4 video wall array on the back wall of the room. You would have a large venue device such as direct view LED or projection for the forward screen in the front of the room. And then you would also have physical students with their attention directed to the forward screen and the professor. Now, what this does is it really helps maintain something called the teaching style. Now, I know as educators, even as corporate, we don't consider the teaching style of the professors as much when we select our equipment. However, we should, because the reality is all of our students and all of our stakeholders deserve to have a professor that's in their own element, right? These people go to school for decades to learn what they learn to be able to translate that to students. So this helps the professor maintain their same teaching style because there are physical students, and it takes away the distraction of virtual students and physical students in the same room because they can't see each other, right? The virtual students can only see the professor or the forward part of the room, and the physical students, being that the monitors are behind them, should not be able to see the virtual students. Next consideration, larger rooms, larger screens, distance students. Now, this is where sightlines become even more important. If you look at the image on the right-hand side, that desk is designed for 4 students. Well, based on social distancing awareness now, that desk may only hold 2 students. So now we're going to have students sitting at the extreme left, right, front, and back of almost every classroom or every corporate space because of social distance awareness. So that monitor, that forward screen that's right in the middle of that room is really no longer suffice for your outer row of students or, based on sightlines. So at this point, we need to jump over to the image to the left and look at better sightlines and to make sure that, again, people aren't having to crane their neck to see the information displayed. Next consideration, personal space, personal screens, remote students. Now, this requires a bit of broadcast / studio expertise, right? Because you're not necessarily setting up a conference room or a classroom in this scenario. You're setting up a broadcast studio. Now, maybe you don't want to necessarily get into that. I'm sure there's some partners on the line, and there's some partners that are going to do some presentations consequently after mine that will better help you understand the dynamics of setting up a broadcast studio for remote viewing. But this is a reality, right? We're seeing more and more universities and corporate operations dedicating physical space to broadcast studios, whether it's being used for promotional activities, most commonly in corporate, or if it's being used for simulcast, also in corporate, or lectures in education. Consider dedicated physical space for a broadcast studio. Now, also want to talk just, again, everyday opportunities for displays, right? Because that is the important part. This is the part that you see. So you got your common areas, whether that's in a corporate environment or in an education space. You've got your alumni and donor walls. You've got special events. You've got art exhibitions. There's many different avenues to deploy display technology. And we'll get to the bottom line here in a few more slides, but I really want you to grasp from this presentation is to understand that it's okay to use multiple different types of display technologies in the same space. So social distance measures, wayfinding, command and control, obviously that's health and public safety. Then you've got next generation opportunities, athletics and esports. You got your active scene, which if you're interested in projecting onto glass, please let us know. At Sharp NEC, we do have a solution called Active Scene that allows you to rear project onto any existing glass. Simulation and visualization, simulated trading floors. This is Wright State University near Dayton, Ohio, that has in their business school, a whole trading floor with direct view LED projectors, desktop monitors, a flat panel, and even a good old fashioned whiteboard over in the corner as well. So again, here's the bottom line. In order to meet the needs and achieve the goals of current and future spaces, right? Everybody wants to be future proof. Everybody wants to, plan for the future. I understand. But in order to meet those needs, you must use a variety of display technology simultaneously. It's not okay just to use projection anymore in a classroom or in a conference room. You're going to need auxiliary monitors. You're going to need confidence monitors for your speakers. You really want to understand, again, how can you deploy technology to enhance the viewing experience? So again, bottom line, in order to meet the needs and achieve the goals of current and future spaces, you must use a variety of display technology simultaneously. And with that, guys, that's it. If you don't get anything else from everything that I said this morning, take a screenshot of the bottom line, because using display technology in multiple forms in the same space is the future. It's the hybrid future, it's the regular future, and it's really the new normal. So with that, again, here's my contact information. but I'm going to send it back over to the team at Lightworks to facilitate the drawing for the Amazon gift card.